A knife is coming at Bruce Lee's chest. 4 inches of military steel, moving fast, aimed at the space between the collarbones. Behind the knife, a fist. Behind the fist, a wrist, a forearm, tattoos in dark ink, a shoulder, 200 pounds of man leaning forward on wet concrete. The man's weight is behind the blade and the blade is closing the distance, and the distance between the tip of the knife and Bruce Lee's chest is 3 feet in closing and 2 feet in closing in 1 foot and Bruce Lee's hands are at his sides. His feet are in the same place they were 4 seconds ago. His weight is centered. 138 pounds in a leather jacket on a wet parking lot behind a restaurant in Chinatown under one sodium lamp that turns everything the color of a warning. His hands are at his sides. A knife is aimed at his chest. His hands are at his sides. This is the third thrust. The first one came low, aimed at the liver, the space between the left hip and the bottom rib. Bruce shifted his hips. 1 inch. The blade went past. Bruce didn't block. Bruce didn't grab. Bruce moved 1 inch and the blade had nothing to cut. The second one came lower, aimed at the belly. The man stepped in as he thrust. Bruce turned his torso, a quarter turn, and the blade went past his right hip. The man's arm was fully extended and his face was close enough for Bruce to touch, and Bruce didn't touch it. Bruce turned back to center. His hands were at his sides. Now the third. The arm is extending. The shoulder is behind the arm. 200 pounds is behind the shoulder. 4 inches of steel is aimed at the chest of a man who weighs 138 pounds and who is standing on wet concrete under an orange light in Los Angeles in the fall of 1969 and whose hands are still. The concrete was wet. It had rained an hour before. Not hard, the kind of rain Los Angeles gets in November when the sky remembers it has a job and does it for 20 minutes and stops. The rain stopped. The water stayed. And the water on the concrete caught the sodium lamp and doubled it. 1 light above. 1 below. So the parking lot had 2 suns, both orange, both small, both the color of something that hasn't gone wrong yet. The parking lot was behind the restaurant. Small. Space for 8 cars, maybe. 2 were parked. A Buick at the far end. A Ford closer to the door. A steam vent in the brick wall pushed warm air into the cold night, and the steam rose through the orange light, and the parking lot looked like a stage that had been set for something nobody had rehearsed. Bruce had come out of the back door about 4 minutes before the knife came out. He'd been inside for maybe an hour. A dinner. The chain doesn't carry who he was eating with, just that he was there, and that he left through the back door, and that he walked toward his car. His shoes were leather, not canvas, not rubbery leather, and leather on wet concrete makes a specific sound, a sound that carries in the quiet, a sound that says, someone is walking and the someone is not trying to be quiet. Bruce put his hands in the pockets of his leather jacket. November cold. Not freezing, but the kind of cold that makes you put your hands somewhere warm. Bruce walked toward his car. His breath made small clouds under the orange light. The Marine was already on the parking lot. He had come out of a bar. Not the restaurant, a bar next door or across the alley. The chain isn't precise about which door, just that the Marine came from a place where he'd been drinking and the place was close. He walked onto the lot and he walked in a straight line. He wasn't stumbling. That's a detail the chain carried. The man walked straight. His feet hit the concrete in even steps. His shoulders were level. The alcohol had taken something away, but it wasn't balance. It wasn't coordination. It was the thing that sits between the thought and the act. The thing that says, don't. That thing was gone. Everything else was still there. The Marine was big. 6'1", maybe 6'2". About 200 pounds, and the 200 sat in the shoulders and the chest. Olive field jacket with the sleeves rolled past the forearms. The forearms were thick and the forearms had tattoos, dark ink, capital letters, the kind of ink you get in a place where you don't choose the chair and you don't choose the artist and the only thing you choose is which word goes on which arm. Buzz cut growing out. A week past regulation. Maybe 2. And the voice, here is a detail the chain carried, a detail I want you to hold, the voice was young. The body was big. The shoulders were big. The tattoos said things that big men say. But the voice was 22. Maybe 23. The voice hadn't finished becoming the voice it was going to be. The voice cracked between words, the way a voice cracks when the voice is still deciding what it sounds like. Bruce was walking toward his car. The Marine was walking toward nothing in particular. Their paths crossed under the sodium lamp. The Marine looked at Bruce. What the Marine saw was an Asian man in a leather jacket walking alone on a wet parking lot at night. What the Marine decided, in the space between seeing and speaking, in the space where the thing that says don't used to live and didn't live anymore, what the Marine decided was that this was a category, not a person. And the Marine opened his mouth. The words were racial. The chain is clear about that. The chain carries tone loud, hard, the kind of voice that turns a word into a shove before the word is finished. The exact words didn't survive 4 sets of ears. The tone survived. The intent survived. The intent was, you are less than me, and I am telling you on this parking lot, in this voice, under this light. Bruce stopped walking. He took his hands out of his pockets. He turned to face the Marine. He didn't say anything. He stood on the wet concrete and looked at the Marine and the Marine looked at him and for a moment the parking lot was 2 men and a lamp and the sound of steam from the vent and nothing else. The Marine kept talking. Bruce stood and watched. His hands were at his sides. His weight settled to center, not forward, not back, and his eyes were on the Marine and his body was quiet in the way that water is quiet before the water does something. The Marine stepped closer. 3 feet between them now. Maybe less. And the Marine's right hand went to his right pocket. The hand came out of the pocket and in the hand was a knife. One motion. Hand to pocket. Knife out. Blade locked. One motion, clean, no fumble, no pause. The kind of motion that lives in the muscles and doesn't need the brain. The kind of motion that works through alcohol because the muscles learned it in a place where alcohol wasn't available and repetition was the only thing between the fear and the waiting. The knife was military. The blade was about 4 inches. Fixed when locked. Not a switchblade. Not a pocket knife. A tool made for a specific kind of work, and the man holding it had done the specific kind of work. The grip told the story. The Marine held the knife with the blade forward, thumb on the spine, the handle seated deep against the heel of his palm. Not the grip you see in movies, fist around the handle, blade hanging from the bottom of the hand, the way you'd hold a hammer. This was the other grip. The one they teach you. The one where the blade extends from the top of the fist like a finger, like a steel finger, and the thumb presses the spine to keep it steady and the wrist stays locked and the power comes from the shoulder, not the wrist. The man who was watching from the back door, the man who would tell my father, he noticed the grip before he noticed the knife. That's what the chain carried. The grip first. The knife second. Because the grip said something the knife couldn't say by itself. The grip said, I was taught. The grip said, I have held this before. The grip said, someone stood behind me and corrected my thumb, and I did it again and again and again until my hand did this without asking my head. You learn that grip somewhere with a number instead of a name. Bruce looked at the knife hand. Not the face. The hand. Bruce's eyes went to the Marine's right hand and stayed there, on the knuckles, on the thumb, on the angle of the blade, on the space between the fingers and the steel. I think Bruce read the grip the way my father read an engine. One look. You know what it is. You know where it was trained. You know what it can do. You know its limits. Bruce's hands stayed at his sides. The Marine said something else. More words. The same tony, loud, racial, the young voice cracking under the weight of what it was trying to be. The man was performing. The man was performing rage for an audience of one, and the audience wasn't reacting, and the man didn't know what to do with the silence, so the man filled the silence with more words, and the words ran out of meaning and became just sound, just noise on a parking lot, and when the noise ran out there was nothing left but the knife. The Marine came forward. First thrust. Low. Liver level. Short and straight, the blade aimed at the space between Bruce's left hip and the bottom rib. Not a slash. A punch with steel in it. The arm extended fast and the body followed the arm. Bruce shifted his hips. 1 inch. Maybe 2. His left hip pulled back, his right hip came forward, and his torso rotated just enough to let the blade pass through the space where his body had been. The blade went past his left side. Close enough to hear. Bruce didn't touch the arm. Didn't block. Didn't grab. He let it go past like a car on a road. The Marine pulled back. The knife returned to center. His weight resettled. His grip hadn't changed, thumb on the spine, blade forward, handle deep. Bruce was standing in the same spot. Second thrust. Faster. Lower. Aimed at the belly, center mass, the place where you aim when precision doesn't matter and you just want the blade inside the other person. The Marine stepped in as he thrust, closing the distance, putting his weight behind the steel. Bruce turned. A quarter turn, smooth, torso rotating on the axis of his spine, and the blade went past his right hip. The Marine's arm was fully extended and his face was close enough for Bruce to touch, and Bruce didn't touch it. Bruce turned back to center. His hands were at his sides. 2 thrusts. 2 misses. Not because the Marine was bad at this. The thrusts were short and fast and aimed where they were supposed to be aimed. 2 misses because the man he was aiming at was not where the blade arrived. The man was 1 inch away from where the blade arrived, and 1 inch was enough, and the man's feet hadn't moved. The Marine was breathing through his mouth. His jaw was tight. The muscles in his forearms were hard, not from technique now, from squeezing. He was squeezing the handle because the handle was the only thing doing what it was supposed to do. His body was supposed to put the knife into the other man. His body was failing. The knife was still in his hand. The knife was the only thing that was still working. And then the third thrust, the one that's frozen, the one I stopped on, the Marine's right arm extending, the shoulder behind it, 200 pounds behind the shoulder, 4 inches of steel aimed at the center of Bruce Lee's chest. We're not there yet. First I need to tell you what Bruce did with his hands. Bruce Lee's hands were at his sides for the first 2 thrusts. I need you to understand what that means. A knife is coming at you. 4 inches of steel, A trained grip behind it. 200 pounds behind the grip. And your hands are at your sides. Not up. Not in a guard. Not between you and the blade. At your sides, the way your hands hang when you're standing in line at a grocery store. There is a reason for this, and the reason is not bravery, and the reason is not showmanship, and the reason is not that Bruce Lee didn't care about a knife. Bruce Lee cared very much about knives. Bruce Lee had studied knife defense for years, with Dan Inosanto, with others, in his garage in Culver City, on mats, on concrete, with rubber blades and wooden blades, and when the understanding was deep enough, with live steel. Bruce Lee knew what a knife could do to a body. He knew the mathematics of it, the speed of a thrust versus the speed of a block, the angles of entry, the places where 4 inches of blade finds something that bleeds and doesn't stop bleeding. Bruce knew the math. And the math said, don't reach for the knife. Here is why. A trained knife thrust short, straight, thumb on the spine, travels about 3 feet in a quarter of a second. A hand reaching for the knife hand from a guard position travels maybe 2 feet in a quarter of a second. The knife is faster. The knife is always faster. If you reach for the knife hand and you miss, and the margin for missing is less than an inch, the knife is now past your hand and into your body, and your reaching hand is behind the knife and can't get back in time. Bruce shifted his weight to his back foot. His hands were at his sides, but his weight was back, sitting in the rear hip, loading the rear leg, and this is the detail that the man by the door noticed. This is the detail that traveled through the chain. Bruce was heavy in the back. Heavy in the back means, I am ready to move, but the move is away, the move is lateral, the move is rotation. Heavy in the back means, I will not come to the knife. I will let the knife come to me, and I will not be where the knife arrives. 2 thrusts. 2 rotations. Hips moving, torso turning, feet staying where they were. The blade missing by inches, not because Bruce was lucky, but because Bruce was 1 inch ahead of the blade, 1 inch in the right direction, and 1 inch is enough when you know the angle and the speed and the length of the arm behind the steel. His hands were at his sides because his hands were not the weapon. His hips were the weapon. His weight was the weapon. The 1 inch was the weapon. But the hands were not going to stay at his sides. The hands were waiting. The hands were at his sides the way a cat's paws are on the ground before the cat moves. Not relaxed, ready. Not passive, loaded. The fingers were open. Not curled, not fisted. Open, the way you open your hand when you're about to pick something up. I think Bruce was waiting for the 3rd thrust. I think the first 2 thrusts were information. I think Bruce watched the first thrust and saw the angle and the speed and the line and the recovery time, how long it took the Marine's arm to come back, how long the arm was extended, how wide the opening was when the arm was out and the body was committed and the knife was past the target and the knife hand was alone, out there, away from the body, with nothing between it and whatever wanted to take it. The first thrust, information. The 2nd thrust, confirmation. The 3rd thrust, the one Bruce was going to answer. The Marine didn't know this. The Marine knew that he had thrust twice and missed twice, and that the small man in the leather jacket hadn't moved his feet and hadn't raised his hands, and that this was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. The man was supposed to run. The man was supposed to flinch. The man was supposed to put his hands up and back away, and the Marine was supposed to follow, and the knife was supposed to find the body. That was the script. The script had always worked before, in the places with numbers instead of names, in the alleys, in the dark, in every place where a knife and a hand and a voice behind the knife had been enough to make a man do what the knife wanted. The script wasn't working. The Marine was breathing through his mouth. His heart was pushing blood at a rate that the alcohol was making worse. The adrenaline was mixing with the drink, and the mixture was making his hands warm and his feet slow and his thoughts short. He had a knife. The other man didn't. He was 60 pounds heavier. He was 5 inches taller. He had training. The other man was standing still with his hands at his sides. He had to go again. He went again. The Marine's right arm came forward. This thrust was different. This thrust was aimed at the center of the chest, not the hip, not the belly, the chest. Center mass. The biggest target on the body. The Marine had aimed small twice and missed twice, and now the Marine was aiming big because the Marine's brain had made a calculation, a drunk, angry, adrenaline-flooded calculation, and the calculation was bigger target, harder to miss. The arm extended. The shoulder came behind it. The weight came behind the shoulder. 200 pounds moving forward on wet concrete, the back foot pushing off, the front foot stepping in, the body compressing into a line from heel to blade, everything the Marine had, everything the training had given him, everything the body remembered from the place with the number instead of the name, all of it behind 4 inches of steel aimed at the center of Bruce Lee's chest. Bruce moved. Not his hips this time. Not a rotation. Not the door on a hinge movement that had let the first 2 thrusts pass. This time Bruce moved forward. Into the thrust. Toward the blade. His left hand came up. The left hand came up fast, faster than the thrust, faster than the arm behind the thrust, and the left hand didn't go for the blade. The left hand went for the wrist. The Marine's right wrist. The space between the base of the palm and the forearm, the narrow channel where the tendons run and the bones are close to the surface, and the grip on anything, on a handle, on a knife, on the world, is controlled by the things that pass through that narrow space. Bruce's left hand closed on the Marine's right wrist. Not a grab. Not a clutch. A close, the way a door closes, clean and firm and all the way. The fingers wrapped the wrist and the thumb pressed into the inside of the wrist, into the channel, into the tendons, and the press was fast and deep, and the Marine's grip on the knife changed. The grip didn't release, not yet, but the grip changed. The thumb on the spine of the blade lost pressure. The handle shifted in the palm. The taut grip, the trained grip, the grip that had survived alcohol and adrenaline and 2 missed thrusts, that grip was now fighting against a thumb pressed into the tendons that controlled it. Bruce's right hand came up. The right hand came to the knife. Not to the blade, to the handle. To the space between the Marine's fingers and the steel. Bruce's right hand found the handle the way a key finds a lock, precisely, on the first try, without searching. And Bruce took the knife. The man by the door, the man who would tell my father, said that taking was one motion. Left hand on the wrist. Right hand on the handle. Turn, pull, done. He said he didn't see the knife leave the Marine's hand. He said he saw the knife in the Marine's hand, and then he saw the knife in Bruce's hand, and the space between those 2 moments was empty. There was no between. There was, the Marine had it. And then, Bruce had it. The Marine's hand was open. The Marine's hand was empty. The Marine's hand was still extended, still out in front of his body, still in the shape of holding something. But the something was gone. Bruce stepped back. 1 step. His left hand released the wrist. His right hand held the knife. He held it correctly, thumb on the spine, blade forward, handle deep against the heel of the palm. The same grip the Marine had used. The taut grip. Except that Bruce's grip was still and quiet the way the Marine's grip had been still and quiet at the beginning, before the thrusting and the missing and the breathing through the mouth. Bruce was holding the knife. The Marine was holding air. The parking lot was very quiet. The steam vent hissed. The sodium lamp hummed. The water on the concrete reflected two men and a knife, and the knife was in the wrong hands now, and both men knew it, and the man by the door knew it, and the night was orange and wet and quiet. 3 feet of wet concrete between them. The Marine's arm was still extended. His fingers were still open, still in the shape of the knife, still curled around the ghost of the handle. His brain was behind his body. His body had already registered the loss. The hand was empty, the wrist was burning where the thumb had pressed, the tendons were singing with a pain that the alcohol was only now beginning to mask. But the brain was still in the thrust. The brain was still pushing forward. The brain was still sending the signal, stab him, stab him, stab him, and the hand had nothing to stab with. Bruce stood 3 feet away. The knife in his right hand. Blade forward. Thumb on the spine. The same grip. The taut grip. The grip looked different in Bruce's hand. The grip looked like it had been there for years. The grip looked like it had been born in that hand. The Marine's arm came down. Slowly. The arm came down the way a flag comes down, still attached to something, still part of a structure, but the wind has stopped and the arm came down and the hand closed into a fist and the fist hung at his side and the fist was empty and the empty fist was the saddest thing on that parking lot. I think the Marine understood in that moment. I think the alcohol was still in his blood and the anger was still in his chest and the words he'd said were still in the air, still hanging there, racial and loud and cracked. But underneath all of that, in the place where the body knows things before the brain admits them, I think the Marine understood that he had pulled a knife on a man who could take a knife. Bruce didn't move forward. Bruce didn't advance. 3 feet between them. Bruce held the knife and held the distance, and the distance was a choice. The distance said, I have what you had. I am where I am. You are where you are. This distance is my decision. The Marine's left hand came up, not to fight, not to grab, not to swing. The left hand came up, palm out. The universal gesture. The gesture that means the same thing in every language and on every parking lot. I'm done. Bruce watched the hand. Bruce watched the palm. Bruce's eyes went from the palm to the face, and the face was different now. The face was young. The face had been angry 4 seconds ago, and now the face was young, and the young face was afraid. Not the afraid that comes before a fight, the afraid that comes after a man realizes what he almost did. The afraid that comes when the alcohol thins just enough for the brain to see the shape of what just happened. The shape was, I pulled a knife on a man and the man took the knife and the man is holding the knife and I am standing on wet concrete with an empty hand and a palm in the air. Bruce spoke. The voice was quiet. The voice was the same voice from before, the salt-passing voice, the even voice, the voice with no edge. The chain doesn't carry the words. The words are lost in the space between 4 sets of ears. But the chain carries the tone, and the tone was, this is over. The Marine's other hand came up. Both palms out now. Both hands empty. Both hands saying what the mouth couldn't say because the mouth was the thing that had started this and the mouth didn't have the right to end it. Bruce looked at the man for a long time. Maybe 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a long time when one man is holding another man's knife. 5 seconds is a long time when the sodium lamp is humming and the steam is hissing and the wet concrete is orange and the air between two men is heavy with what just happened and what almost happened and what didn't happen. 5 seconds. Then Bruce did something the man by the door didn't expect. Bruce flipped the knife. He flipped it in his right hand, a rotation, blade over handle, handle over blade, one turn, controlled. The kind of flip that comes from knowing the weight and the balance and the center of gravity of the thing in your hand. The knife turned once and Bruce caught it by the blade. Not the handle. The blade. He caught the blade between his thumb and 2 fingers, the flat of the blade between the pads, the edge away from the skin. Bruce extended his right arm. He held the knife out, handle first, toward the Marine. The handle pointed at the Marine's chest the way the blade had pointed at Bruce's chest 30 seconds ago. The chain carries what happened next in one sentence. One sentence from the man by the door to my father. One sentence from my father to me. The sentence is, he gave it back. The Marine looked at the knife. The handle was 3 feet from his chest. The handle was being offered. The blade was between Bruce Lee's fingers and the handle was being offered, and the Marine looked at the handle and then looked at Bruce's face, and Bruce's face was still and quiet and even, the way Bruce's body had been still and quiet and even when the knife was coming at him. The Marine took the knife. His right hand came up slowly. Slowly, the way you reach for something that might not be real, and his fingers closed around the handle. The taut grip. The thumb on the spine. The grip that his muscles knew. Except the grip was different now. The grip was a man holding a knife that had been taken from him and given back, and the holding was different because everything was different. Bruce released the blade. His fingers opened. His hand came back to his side. Both hands at his sides. 138 pounds on wet concrete. Empty hands. The Marine was holding the knife. Bruce Lee was standing in front of a man with a knife, and Bruce Lee's hands were at his sides, and this was the same picture as 4 minutes ago. The same parking lot. The same orange light. The same steam. The same 2 men. One with a knife. One without. But the picture was different now, and both men knew it was different, and the man by the door knew it was different, and the difference was not in the picture. The difference was in what had happened between the 2 versions of the picture. The knife had moved. The knife had left one hand and entered another hand, and the other hand had given it back, and now the knife was back where it started, and nothing was the same. The Marine closed the knife. The blade folded into the handle. One motion. Clean. The muscles doing what the muscles knew. The knife went into his right pocket. The Marine turned around. He walked across the parking lot. His feet were steady. His shoulders were level. He walked past the Buick. He walked past the Ford. He walked to the edge of the parking lot, and he turned left, and he was gone. The footsteps faded. The parking lot was 1 man and a lamp and 2 cars and steam. Bruce stood for a moment. His hands were in the pockets of his leather jacket. His breath made small clouds under the orange light. He stood the way a man stands when a man is letting something settle, the way water settles after you drop a stone into it, the ripples moving out, getting smaller, until the surface is flat again. Bruce walked to his car. He opened the door. He sat down. He closed the door. The engine started. The headlights came on, and the headlights were white, and the white light cut through the orange light, and for a moment the parking lot had 3 colors: orange from the lamp, white from the headlights, and the dark between them. The car backed out. The car turned. The car left the parking lot. The man by the back door stood there for a while. The man by the door, the man who told my father, was not a martial artist. He was a cook. He worked in the restaurant. He had come outside for air. and he had stayed outside because a man with a knife was standing 3 feet from another man, and the cook didn't move because moving would have put him in the space between the two men, and the space between the two men was not a place to be. The cook watched. He watched from the back door, 20 feet away, and he saw the 3 thrusts and the take and the return and the walking away. He saw the whole thing under the sodium lamp. And the thing the cook remembered most, the thing the cook told my father, the thing that survived 4 tellings, was not the speed. Was not the knife changing hands. Was not the moment Bruce held the blade between his fingers and offered the handle back. The thing the cook remembered was the grip. Bruce held the knife with the thumb on the spine. The cook didn't know why this mattered. The cook told my father, and my father knew why it mattered. My father told me, and I know why it mattered. The grip matters because Bruce didn't learn it from the Marine. Bruce walked onto that parking lot with a knife grip already inside his hands. The grip was there before the knife was there. The grip was trained into the tendons and the muscles and the memory of the fingers years before a drunk man in an olive jacket pulled a blade in a parking lot in Chinatown. Bruce trained knife defense with Dan Inosanto. Dan Inosanto was Filipino. Dan Inosanto carried the blade arts of the Philippines, Kelly, Eskrima, Arnis, the arts where the knife is not a last resort, not a backup, not a thing you pull when your fists aren't enough. The knife in those arts is the first language. The blade speaks first. The empty hand speaks second. And the man who understands the blade, who can read it, who can predict it, who can take it, is the man who has held it so many times that the blade is a part of his hand the way a finger is a part of his hand. Bruce held knives with Dan in his garage in Culver City. Bruce held rubber blades. Bruce held wooden blades. Bruce held live steel. Bruce stood on a mat and Dan came at him with a blade, short thrusts, long slashes, angles, and Bruce moved. Bruce shifted his hips. Bruce turned his torso. Bruce read the angle of the wrist and the direction of the shoulder and the weight of the body behind the steel. Bruce learned to see the thrust before the thrust. Bruce learned to read the arm the way you read a sentence, beginning, middle, end, and to be somewhere else before the sentence finished. And Bruce learned to take. The take is a specific thing. The take is not a grab. A grab is what a man does when a man is afraid and the fear makes the hand close around anything within reach. A grab is uncontrolled. A grab is hope. The take is controlled. The take is physics. The take is left hand on the wrist, thumb into the tendon channel, right hand on the handle, turn, separate. 2 hands. 2 targets. 1 motion. Bruce practiced the take hundreds of times. Maybe thousands. In the garage. On the mat. With Dan standing across from him with a blade and the blade coming in Bruce's left hand finding the wrist and Bruce's right hand finding the handle and the blade leaving one set of fingers and entering another set of fingers and the transition happening in the space between 2 heartbeats. The cook in the parking lot saw the take once. The cook saw it happen in what the cook described to my father as no time. Not fast. Not quick. No time. As if the knife had simply decided to be in a different hand. As if the knife had always been in Bruce's hand and the Marine had been borrowing it and the borrowing was over. The cook didn't know about Dan Inosanto. The cook didn't know about Cali or Eskrima or the garage in Culver City. The cook knew what he saw. A knife left one hand and entered another, and the man who now held the knife held it as if he had been born holding it. My father knew the rest. My father knew about the garage and the training and the rubber blades and the live steel and the thousands of repetitions that turned a technique into a reflex and the reflex into something that looked, from 20 feet away, like no time at all. My father told me this story in his car. We were in the driveway. November. The engine was off. The windows were up and the glass was fogging from the inside, from our breathing, from the heat of two people in a closed space, and my father was looking through the windshield at the garage door, and the garage door was closed and the light behind the garage door was off. He was holding the steering wheel. Both hands. 10 and 2. The engine was off, but his hands were on the wheel the way hands stay on things when the hands need something to hold. His knuckles were large. His fingers were thick. Mechanic's hands. Hands that had held wrenches and ratchets and timing chains, and the hands of other men and the hands of his children, and none of those things had made the hands soft. He gave it back, my father said. He said it quietly. He said it to the windshield more than to me. His breath made a small cloud on the glass, and the cloud shrank and disappeared. The guy had a knife. Bruce took it. And then he gave it back. My father shook his head. Not a big shake. A small one. The kind that means, I have told you the thing and the thing is still strange to me. The thing was strange when I heard it, and it is strange now, and telling it to you doesn't make it less strange. BM5, we'll come back to that car. Right now we're on a parking lot in Chinatown, and a knife has just changed hands twice, and the question is not how Bruce took the knife. The question is why he gave it back. Bruce gave the knife back. I've told you the what. Now I need to tell you the why, or what I believe is the why, based on what the chain carried and what my father said and what I've turned over in my head in the years since I sat in that car with the fogging windows and listened. Bruce gave the knife back because the knife was never the problem. The knife was steel. 4 inches of steel with a handle and an edge and a point. The knife didn't walk onto the parking lot. The knife didn't say the words. The knife didn't decide to thrust at a man's chest. The knife was in a hand, and the hand belonged to a man, and the man was the problem. And the man was not solved by taking his knife. I think Bruce understood this in the seconds between the take and the return. I think Bruce stood on that parking lot with the Marine's knife in his hand and looked at the Marine's face, the young face, the 22-year-old face, the face that had been performing rage and was now performing fear, and I think Bruce made a calculation. Not a philosophical calculation. Not a moral calculation. A practical one. If Bruce keeps the knife, the man walks away without a knife. The man walks away and the man has lost. The man has lost his weapon and his control and his story about himself, the story that says I am big and I am trained and I am dangerous. The man walks away and the loss follows him. The loss sits in his chest the way the alcohol sits in his blood. And the loss turns into something. The loss turns into a reason to come back. The loss turns into a next time. Bruce gave the knife back because taking the knife was not enough. Bruce needed the man to understand something. And the understanding required the knife to go back. Bruce took the knife to show the man what could happen. Bruce gave the knife back to show the man that it didn't have to. Here is Bruce standing on wet concrete with a knife in his right hand, blade between his fingers, handle pointed at the chest of a man who is afraid. Bruce's arm is extended. Bruce's face is even. Bruce's voice is the voice that passes salt. And the handle is 3 feet from the man's chest, and the handle is being offered, and the offering is the message. The message is, I could keep this. I could keep this and you would walk away missing something, and we both know what you'd be missing. But I'm giving it back. I'm giving it back because I don't need it. I never needed it. You needed it. And now you know that you need it and I don't, and that's the thing I wanted you to know. That's the whole thing. Bruce didn't say this. Bruce didn't make a speech. Bruce held out a knife, handle first, and the holding was the speech. The holding said everything that words would have made smaller. The Marine took the knife. The Marine closed the knife. The Marine put the knife in his pocket. The Marine turned around. The Marine walked away. I think the Marine understood. I think the Marine walked across that parking lot and turned left and walked into the night, and the night swallowed him, the olive jacket, the tattoos, the buzz cut, the empty right hand that was now holding a closed knife in a pocket, and I think somewhere between the parking lot and wherever he was going, the Marine understood what had happened to him. A man had taken his knife. And the man had given it back. And the giving back was worse than the taking. The taking was violence. The giving back was something else. The giving back was the kind of thing that sits in a man's chest for years, the kind of thing that changes the shape of a story, the kind of thing that makes a man put a knife in a drawer and leave it there. I believe this. I don't know. There are 3 faces in this story, and I've only shown you 2. Bruce's face, even, still, the face of a man who has all of his control and has chosen to use it the way he wants to use it. The Marine's face, young, angry, then afraid, then something else. Something quieter. Something that doesn't have a word. The 3rd face is the cook's. The cook stood by the back door for a while after Bruce's car left. The steam from the vent kept rising. The sodium lamp kept humming. The parking lot was empty, 2 cars, 1 lamp, wet concrete, no people. The cook stood there and the cook didn't go inside. The cook's face, my father described it. My father met the cook maybe 2 months after the parking lot. The cook told the story once, at a dinner, and my father watched the cook's face as the cook told it. He kept touching his hands, my father said. My father said this in the car. In the driveway. The fog on the windshield had spread. The outside was blurry now. The streetlights were smears of yellow through the glass. When he told the part about the knife going back, he kept touching his hands. Like he was checking if his hands were empty. My father looked at his own hands on the steering wheel. I've seen men fight, my father said. I've seen men win fights. I've seen men lose fights. I've never heard of a man giving a knife back. BM5, we'll come back to the car in a moment. But there's one more thing on that parking lot. One more thing the cook told my father that the chain carried all the way to me, and it's not about the knife. After the Marine walked away, Bruce stood on the parking lot for maybe 30 seconds. His hands were in the pockets of his leather jacket. His breath made clouds. The steam rose from the vent. The sodium lamp hummed. Bruce stood, and the standing was the kind of standing that isn't waiting for anything. The standing was a man letting something settle. The ripples moving out. Getting smaller. Bruce walked to his car. He put his hand on the door handle. He didn't open the door. He turned around. He leaned against the car. His back against the driver's door, his hands still in his pockets, his eyes on the parking lot, on the wet concrete, on the place where the Marine had stood, on the empty space that had been full of a man and a knife and was now full of nothing. Bruce stood against his car for another minute. Maybe 2. The cook was watching. The cook was still by the back door. The cook had been about to go inside, the story was over. The Marine was gone, the parking lot was empty, and then Bruce had leaned against the car instead of getting in, and the cook stayed. Bruce took his right hand out of his pocket. He looked at his right hand. He turned it over, palm up, palm down, palm up. He looked at the fingers. He looked at the space between the thumb and the forefinger, the space where the blade had been, the space where the handle had been. He flexed the fingers. Opened them. Closed them. Opened them again. Then Bruce put his right hand flat on the hood of the car. The hood was cold. November. The metal had been sitting in the night air for an hour and the metal was cold and wet, and Bruce put his hand flat on the cold wet metal and held it there. Palm down. Fingers spread. The orange light on the back of his hand. The cook thought Bruce was checking something. The cook thought Bruce was looking at his hand to see if the knife had cut him, to see if there was blood, to see if the blade had nicked a finger during the take. The cook told my father this. I thought he was looking for a cut. But there was no cut. Bruce's hand was clean. The blade had not touched him. The take had been clean, left hand on wrist, right hand on handle, turn, separate, and the blade had gone from one man to another without touching skin. Bruce wasn't checking for blood. I think Bruce was checking for something else. I think Bruce put his hand on the cold metal of the hood to feel the cold. To feel something solid and real and simple after the thing that had just happened. The cold metal under the palm. The wetness. The November air. Something that wasn't a knife. Something that wasn't a man's wrist. Something that wasn't the taut grip or the tendon channel or the angle of the blade or the sound of a young voice cracking as it said things that shouldn't be said. I think Bruce put his hand on the hood of the car the way a man puts his feet on the floor after a dream. To make sure the floor is there. To make sure the floor is solid. To make sure. Bruce took his hand off the hood. He opened the car door. He sat down. He closed the door. The engine started. The headlights came on, white light through the orange, and the car backed out and turned and left the parking lot. The cook went inside. The kitchen was warm. The kitchen smelled like garlic and sesame oil and the things that kitchens smell like when kitchens have been working all night. The cook went back to his station. He picked up a knife, a kitchen knife. A chef's knife, the kind of knife that cuts vegetables and meat, and the kind of knife that is not a weapon and is not held with the thumb on the spine. The cook held the kitchen knife, and the kitchen knife was different now. The cook held the kitchen knife and the weight of it was different. Not heavier. Not lighter. Different. The cook put the knife down. He picked it up again. He put it down. The cook didn't tell anyone at the restaurant what he had seen. He told my father, 2 months later, at a dinner. He told it once. My father sat in the car in the driveway. I was in the passenger seat. I was 16. Maybe 17. The age when a father tells a son something and the son doesn't know yet whether the thing is a story or a lesson or both. The age when you sit in a car with the engine off and the windows fogging and you don't say, "Can we go inside?" You don't say anything. You sit. You wait. You let the man with the large knuckles and the mechanic's hands hold the steering wheel and look through the fog at the closed garage door and say the things he needs to say. My father had been quiet for a while after the part about the hood of the car. The part about Bruce's hand flat on the cold metal. My father had said that part slowly, the way you say something when you're seeing it while you're saying it, when the words are pulling the picture out of the place where you keep it and the picture is becoming real again in the air between two people in a car. The fog was thick on the windshield now. The street lights were gone. The world outside was a blur of yellow and dark, and the world inside was 2 seats and a dashboard and my father's hands on the wheel. "You know what the hardest thing is?" my father said. I didn't answer. I knew the question wasn't for me. The question was for the windshield and the fog and the garage door behind the fog. The hardest thing isn't taking the knife. My father's right hand came off the steering wheel. His right hand hung in the air between us, palm up, fingers open, the way Bruce's hand had hung in the air on the parking lot. My father looked at his own hand. The hardest thing is giving it back. My father closed his hand. A fist. Not a tight fist, a slow one. The fingers folding one at a time, the way a flower closes at night. The fist sat on his knee. When a man gives you a reason to hurt him and you can hurt him and you don't, that's one thing. That's restraint. That's discipline. That's the thing they teach you in a dojo, the thing on the wall in the fancy letters. My father opened his hand again. But when a man gives you a reason to hurt him and you can hurt him and you have the weapon in your hand and the weapon is his and you give the weapon back. My father stopped. His hand was open again. His fingers were spread. He was looking at his palm the way Bruce had looked at his palm on the parking lot. Looking at the lines and the calluses and the places where tools had pressed into the skin for 30 years. That's not restraint, my father said. That's something else. I don't have a word for it. My father put his hand back on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. The mechanic's grip. The grip that held engines together and held the wheel and held the story in the car and held the space between a father and a son in a driveway in November. Bruce had a word for it, my father said. I waited. The cook asked him. Months later. The cook saw Bruce at the restaurant again, came in for dinner, same restaurant, different night, and the cook went up to him. The cook told Bruce, I saw what happened in the parking lot. The cook asked, why did you give the knife back? My father looked at the fog on the windshield. Bruce said one word. Respect. That's what Bruce said. One word. The cook asked why he gave the knife back and Bruce said, respect. My father said this word in the car and the word sat in the air the way the knife had sat in Bruce's hand, still, balanced, the weight of it distributed evenly across the silence. Respect. Not for the Marine. Not respect for the man who pulled the knife. Not respect for the slurs or the rage or the 200 pounds of drunk training aimed at a man on a parking lot. That's not what Bruce meant. My father was clear about this. The cook was clear about this. The chain carried the word and the chain carried the meaning and the meaning was not, I respected the man who tried to stab me. Respect for what the knife represents. A knife is a tool. A knife is a decision. A knife is a man saying, I have crossed a line and the line is behind me and the thing in my hand is the proof that I have crossed it. When a man pulls a knife, the man is telling you something about himself that he may not know he's telling you. The man is saying, I am afraid. I am angry. I am beyond the place where my hands are enough. I need this thing between me and you because without this thing I am not enough. Bruce heard that. Bruce saw the knife and heard what the knife was saying. And what the knife was saying was not, I will kill you. What the knife was saying was, I am not enough. And Bruce respected that. Not the anger. Not the racism. Not the thrust aimed at his chest. Bruce respected the confession that the knife represented. The confession that said, I am a man standing on a parking lot and I have a weapon because without the weapon I am just a man and just a man is not enough and I need you to see the weapon so that you will see something other than just a man. Bruce took the knife because Bruce could take the knife. That was the first message, you are not as dangerous as you believe. Bruce gave the knife back because taking the knife wasn't the point. That was the second message. The knife was never what mattered. And there is a third message. A message that sits underneath the other two. A message that my father didn't say directly but that I've found in the years since. The way you find a coin under a couch cushion, not because you were looking for it but because you sat down in the right place. The third message is, I see you. I see you. Not the knife. Not the tattoos. Not the olive jacket and the buzz cut and the taut grip. I see you. The 22-year-old with the cracking voice. The man who went to a place with a number instead of a name and came back with ink on his arms and a grip in his muscles and a hole in the place where the thing that says don't used to be. I see you. And because I see you, I'm giving you back the knife. Because the knife is yours. The knife is part of the story you're telling yourself about who you are, and I am not going to take that story away from you. I am going to show you that the story doesn't work, that the knife can be taken, that the grip can be broken, that the man you thought was less than you was the man who just held your weapon in his hand and gave it back, and then I am going to let you walk away with the story. Because the story is yours. And what you do with the story is yours. I see you. Bruce said, respect. The cook nodded. The cook didn't ask anything else. The cook went back to the kitchen and Bruce went back to his dinner and the parking lot stayed outside, wet and orange and empty, holding the ghost of the thing that had happened there and would never happen there again. My father was not Bruce Lee. My father was a mechanic. My father was 5'10" and 180 pounds and his hands were covered in scars from engines and timing chains and the sharp edges of things that live under the hoods of cars. My father didn't study Cali or Eskrima. My father didn't train in a garage in Culver City with rubber blades. My father held wrenches, not knives. My father's taut grip was for a 3/8 ratchet, not a blade. But my father understood the parking lot. My father understood it because my father had been on parking lots. Not this one, other ones. Different cities. Different years. Different men with different weapons, sometimes a knife, sometimes a bottle, sometimes a fist, sometimes just words. My father had been in the space between a man and a weapon and my father had made decisions in that space. Not always the right decision. Not always the clean decision. Sometimes the decision that leaves a mark on your knuckles and a different kind of mark on the inside of your chest. My father understood why Bruce's hand went to the hood of the car. After a thing like that, my father said, "You need to touch something cold. You need to put your hand on something that isn't a person. Something that doesn't move. Something that's just metal and temperature. You need to know that you're back. That the thing is over. That your hand is your hand again and not the thing your hand just did." My father's hands were on the steering wheel and the steering wheel was cold. November. The car had been sitting in the driveway for 20 minutes with the engine off and the steering wheel was cold and my father's hands were on the cold steering wheel and I understood, in that moment, in the fogging car, at 16 or 17, I understood that my father was doing the same thing Bruce had done on the hood of the car. My father was touching something cold. My father was touching the steering wheel the way Bruce had touched the hood. To come back. To feel something solid after telling something that wasn't solid, something that lived in the air and moved when you tried to hold it. The story had been in the car for 10 minutes. The story had filled the car the way breath fills a balloon, expanding, pressing against the walls, taking up the space where the ordinary air used to be. And now the story was told and my father needed the steering wheel the way Bruce had needed the hood. Something that isn't a person. Something that doesn't move. "Dad," I said. It was the first word I'd said in the car. The first sound other than breathing in my father's voice. The word was small in the space. The word was my voice, and my voice was 17, and my voice cracked on the word the way the Marine's voice had cracked on the parking lot, not because of anger, not because of alcohol, but because my voice was still becoming the voice it was going to be. "Yeah," my father said. "Why did you tell me that?" My father didn't answer right away. He sat with the question the way Bruce had stood with the knife, holding it, looking at it, feeling the weight of it. "Because you're going to be on a parking lot someday," my father said. "Everybody ends up on a parking lot." My father looked at me for the first time since he'd started the story. His eyes were dark and his eyes were wet, not crying, not tears, just the kind of wet that eyes get when the eyes have been looking at something far away for a long time and the looking has cost something. "And when you're on that parking lot," my father said, "I want you to know that there's a man who gave the knife back. I need to take you back to the parking lot. Not to the knife. Not to the take. Not to the return. I need to take you back to the moment before all of that. The moment when Bruce Lee was walking toward his car with his hands in the pockets of his leather jacket and his breath making small clouds in the November air, and the parking lot was just a parking lot, wet concrete, one lamp, two cars, steam from a vent. Before the Marine. Before the words. Before the knife. Bruce was walking toward his car. His shoes were leather and the leather made a sound on wet concrete, and the sound was the sound of a man going home. The sound was ordinary. The sound was the kind of sound that happens 1,000 times a night in 1,000 parking lots in 1,000 cities, and nobody remembers it because there's nothing to remember. A man walks to his car. The shoes make a sound. The man gets in. The man goes home. But a man walked onto the parking lot with a knife in his pocket and words in his mouth, and the ordinary became something else. This is the thing I keep coming back to. This is the thing that sits in my chest the way the story sat in my father's car. The ordinary was one step away from the extraordinary. The ordinary was 4 minutes away from a knife aimed at a man's chest. Bruce was walking to his car, and the walking was ordinary, and then it wasn't. We are all walking to our cars. We are all on parking lots. We are all 2 minutes away from something we didn't expect. We are all one step from the moment when a man walks out of a bar with something in his pocket and something in his mouth, and the night changes shape. Bruce was ready. Not ready in the way that a man is ready when a man is expecting trouble. Bruce wasn't expecting trouble. Bruce was expecting his car. Bruce was expecting the drive home. Bruce was expecting the things that a man expects when a man leaves a restaurant with a full stomach and a quiet mind. Bruce was ready in a different way. Bruce was ready because Bruce had spent years becoming ready. The training. The garage in Culver City. The rubber blades and the wooden blades and the live steel. The thousands of repetitions. The hips learning to shift. The feet learning to stay. The hands learning to wait. The tendons learning the take. Year after year after year, and the years didn't know what they were for. The years didn't know they were for a parking lot in Chinatown in November. The years were for all the parking lots. The years were for the one that came. When the Marine stepped onto the concrete and the words started and the knife came out, Bruce didn't have to become ready. Bruce was already ready. The readiness was in his body the way the taut grip was in the Marine's body, trained, stored, available. The readiness had been there that morning when Bruce woke up. The readiness had been there during dinner. The readiness was there when Bruce walked toward his car with his hands in his pockets. The readiness was there the way the floor is there. You don't think about it, you don't look at it, you don't thank it for being there. But when you need it, it holds you. Bruce's readiness held him. And when the knife was gone and the Marine was gone and the parking lot was empty and Bruce's hand was flat on the cold hood of his car, palm down, fingers spread, feeling the metal and the November, the readiness was still there. The readiness didn't leave because the knife left. The readiness stayed. The readiness would stay until the next parking lot and the next, and Bruce would never know which parking lot would need it, and that was fine because the readiness didn't need to know. The readiness just needed to be there. The readiness was there. I told you about the cook going back inside. I told you the cook picked up a kitchen knife and the kitchen knife was different now. The weight was different. The cook put it down. Picked it up. Put it down. I want to stay on this moment because this moment is the moment that changed the cook. Not the parking lot. Not the take. Not the return. This moment, the moment in the kitchen, the warm kitchen, the garlic and sesame oil kitchen, holding a knife that cuts vegetables and feeling the knife differently. The cook had held that knife 10,000 times. The cook held that knife every night. The cook held it the way a mechanic holds a wrench, without thinking, without noticing, the way you hold a thing that is so familiar it has stopped being a thing and has become an extension of your hand. And now the knife was a thing again. The cook held the kitchen knife and the kitchen knife had weight. Not more weight, just weight. Weight that the cook had stopped noticing and was now noticing again. The handle in the palm. The steel extending from the hand. The edge. The point. The fact that this thing, this kitchen tool, this thing that cuts onions and garlic and meat, is a blade. Is the same category of thing as the blade on the parking lot? Different shape. Different purpose. Same fundamental nature, a piece of steel with an edge, held in a hand, capable of opening things. The cook put the knife down on the cutting board and looked at it. The knife lay on the board under the fluorescent lights of the kitchen, and the fluorescent lights were not orange, the fluorescent lights were white, and the knife looked clean and ordinary and like every other knife in every other kitchen. But the cook had seen what a knife could do in a hand. Not cut. Not slice. Not the things that kitchen knives do. The cook had seen what a knife could mean. The cook had seen a knife become a confession and a threat and a test and a gift, all in 4 minutes, all on a wet parking lot, all under a single lamp. The cook picked up the knife again. The cook held it. The cook went back to work. The cook cut the things that needed cutting. The cook finished the shift. The cook went home. But the knife was different now. Every knife was different now. 2 months later, the cook told my father. And my father carried the story the way the cook carried the knife, with a new awareness of its weight. Foretellings. Bruce Lee on a parking lot. The cook by the back door. My father in a car. Me, right now, in front of you. Foretellings is a thin chain. Foretellings is 4 sets of ears and 4 sets of mouths, and each set loses something and adds something, and the story that arrives is not the story that left. The story that left was a knife on a parking lot. The story that arrives is a knife in a car in a driveway in November, told by a mechanic to his son, fogging the windows with the heat of the telling. I don't know what the cook lost. I don't know what the cook added. The cook saw the parking lot, and the cook told my father, and somewhere between the seeing and the telling, the story changed shape the way water changes shape when you pour it from one glass into another. Same water. Different glass. Different shape. I don't know what my father lost. I don't know what my father added. My father heard the cook and my father told me, and somewhere between the hearing and the telling the story changed shape again. Another glass. Another pour. Same water. I know what I've lost. I know what I've added. I've lost the exact words the Marine said, the racial words, the loud words, the words that cracked in a young voice. Those words are gone. Foretellings dissolved them the way 4 rains dissolve writing on a sidewalk. The shape is there. The chalk is gone. I've added the details that grow in the dark. The details that I didn't hear from my father but that I see when I close my eyes and put myself on the parking lot. The orange light. The steam. The sound of leather shoes on wet concrete. The sound of the blade locking open. These details may have been in the cook's telling. They may have been in my father's telling. They may be mine, grown in the years since the car, grown in the space between 16 and now, grown the way a tree grows around a fence. The fence was there first, but the tree has made it part of itself. I can't separate what I heard from what I grew. This is the nature of a chain. Each link adds metal. Each link adds weight. The chain that started on a parking lot in 1969 is heavier now than it was then, heavier by the cook's fear, heavier by my father's hands on the steering wheel, heavier by my years of turning the story over and over in my head like a stone in a tumbler, wearing it smooth, wearing it bright. The chain is 4 links long and the chain is heavy, and I'm adding a 5th link right now, in this telling, to you. You are the 5th set of ears. You are the next glass. The water is being poured. What will you lose? What will you add? I've been on parking lots. Not with knives. Not with Marines. Not with the things that happened to Bruce under the orange light. My parking lots were smaller. My parking lots were the kind of parking lots where the weapon isn't steel, the weapon is a word, a look, a silence, a turn back, a door closing. I'd been on a parking lot at 14 when a man said something about my mother, and I wanted to break the man's face, and I didn't break the man's face. I stood on the concrete and my hands were at my sides and my hands wanted to be fists, and I didn't let them be fists. That wasn't the taut grip. That wasn't years of training. That was a 14-year-old boy standing in the space between what he wanted to do and what he did in choosing the space. I'd been on a parking lot at 23 when a woman I loved said she didn't love me, and I was holding a glass in my hand and the glass was the only thing in the world, and I squeezed the glass until the glass broke and my hand bled, and the bleeding was the only thing that was happening, and the bleeding was a relief because the bleeding was outside and the thing I was feeling was inside, and now they matched. I'd been on a parking lot at 30 when my father was in a hospital bed and the doctor was saying words and the words were the wrong words, and I wanted to take the words out of the doctor's mouth the way Bruce took the knife out of the Marine's hand, left hand on the wrist. Right hand on the handle, turn, separate, and I couldn't take the words because words aren't knives and you can't take them back once they've been said. I'd been on parking lots. Every parking lot taught me something. Every parking lot was wet and orange and had a lamp and had a space between 2 people and had a thing, a word, a glass, a diagnosis, that sat in that space like a knife. And every parking lot asked the same question the parking lot in Chinatown asked. What are you going to do with your hands? 3 feet. That was the distance on the parking lot. 3 feet between Bruce and the Marine after the take. 3 feet of wet concrete. 3 feet of orange light. 3 feet of air that held the ghost of a knife that had just moved from one hand to another. 3 feet is the distance of a choice. 3 feet is close enough to hit. Close enough to cut. Close enough to do every violent thing that the body knows how to do. 3 feet is also close enough to hand something back. Close enough to extend an arm and offer a handle. close enough to look into a man's eyes and see the fear behind the anger and the youth behind the fear and the human behind the youth. 3 feet is the distance at which a man decides who he is. Bruce stood at 3 feet and decided. The decision was, give it back. The decision was made in the space between 2 heartbeats, maybe less, maybe a fraction of the space between 2 heartbeats, and the decision defined the next 60 years of the story. Because the story didn't end on the parking lot. The story ended in a car in a driveway. The story ended in a kitchen with a cook holding a chef's knife. The story ended here, now, with you. The decision at 3 feet created the chain. If Bruce keeps the knife, the story is a fight story. A man pulls a knife on Bruce Lee and Bruce Lee takes the knife. That's a good story. That's a story people tell in bars. That's a story with a winner and a loser, and the winner is the man who was faster and better, and the loser is the man who went home empty-handed. But Bruce gave the knife back. And the story became something else. The story became a story that a cook tells once, at a dinner, while touching his own hands. The story became a story that a mechanic tells once, in a car, holding a cold steering wheel. The story became a story that sits in a man's chest for 30 years and grows and changes shape and becomes heavier and brighter, and the man still doesn't have a word for it. Because the word Bruce used, respect, is not the whole word. Respect is the surface of the word. Underneath respect is something deeper, and the deeper thing doesn't have a name. The deeper thing is what happens when a man sees another man completely, sees the knife and the fear and the training and the alcohol and the youth and the cracking voice and the tattoos and the place with a number instead of a name, sees all of it, holds all of it, and decides, you are not less than me. You are a man on a parking lot with a knife, and I am a man on a parking lot without a knife, and we are both here, and the distance between us is 3 feet, and I am not going to make the distance bigger. I am not going to take your knife and walk away and leave you smaller than you were. I am going to give you back the knife, and the knife will be different now, and you will be different now, and I will be different now, and the 3 feet between us will be different now. The distance is 3 feet, and the distance is everything. My father opened the car door. The cold air came in. November night, the smell of dead leaves and concrete, and the cold air replaced the warm air that had been living in the car for 20 minutes. The fog on the windshield started to clear. The edges first. Then the middle. The world outside came back in pieces, the garage door, the streetlights, the driveway, the house. My father got out of the car. I got out of the car. We stood in the driveway for a moment, 2 people in the cold, breathing clouds, standing on concrete that was dry because it hadn't rained. My father looked at the garage door. My father's garage was not Bruce Lee's garage in Culver City. My father's garage had a workbench and a tool chest and an engine on a stand and the smell of oil and metal. My father's garage was where my father went when my father needed to hold something that wasn't a story. A wrench. A ratchet. A bolt. Something with weight and thread and purpose. My father didn't go to the garage. My father went to the house. He walked up the 3 steps to the front door. He put his key in the lock. He opened the door. The light from inside fell on the steps, yellow, warm, the color of a house that has people in it. My father stopped in the doorway. He turned around. He looked at me. I was still in the driveway. I was standing on the concrete, 17 years old, my hands in the pockets of my jacket, the way Bruce's hands had been in the pockets of his leather jacket on the parking lot in Chinatown 30 years before. Remember, my father said. That's all. 1 word. Not, remember the story. Not, remember Bruce Lee. Not, remember the knife or the take or the return or the grip. Just remember. My father went inside. The door closed. The light from inside disappeared. The driveway was dark and cold, and I was standing on it. I stood there for a while. My hands were in my pockets. My breath made clouds. The streetlight at the end of the driveway was yellow, not orange, not sodium, yellow, and the yellow light fell on the concrete, and the concrete was dry. I took my right hand out of my pocket. I looked at my right hand. I turned it over, palm up, palm down, palm up. I looked at my fingers. I flexed them. Opened them. Closed them. Opened them. I put my hand flat on the hood of my father's car. The hood was cold. November. The metal had been sitting in the night air, and the metal was cold, and I put my hand flat on the cold metal and held it there. Palm down. Fingers spread. The yellow light on the back of my hand. I felt the cold. I felt the metal. I felt the weight of a story that had traveled from a parking lot to a back door to a dinner to a car to a driveway to my hand on a cold hood in the dark. There is a knife in everyone. Not a blade. Not steel. Not a thing with an edge and a handle and a taut grip. A knife that is sharper than steel and quieter than steel and more dangerous than steel, because this knife doesn't live in a pocket. This knife lives in the space between what a man feels and what a man does. This knife is the thing that comes out when the thing that says don't is gone, when the alcohol or the anger or the fear or the loneliness dissolves the wall between the feeling and the act, and the feeling becomes the act, and the act has an edge. Everyone carries this knife. The Marine carried it in his right pocket. The knife was steel, but the real knife was inside. The real knife was the rage and the racism and the fear and the youth and the cracking voice and the place with a number instead of a name that had taken something out of him and put something else in. The steel was just the steel. The knife was the man. Bruce carried it too. Bruce's knife was different, trained, controlled, sheathed in years of discipline and practice and understanding. Bruce's knife was the thing that let him stand on a parking lot with his hands at his sides while a blade came at his chest. Bruce's knife was the readiness. The readiness was a knife. The readiness said, I can do things to you that you cannot do to me. I can take your weapon. I can take your balance. I can take your confidence. I can take everything you have, and I can do it in the space between two heartbeats. That's a knife. That's the sharpest knife on the parking lot. And Bruce kept it sheathed. Bruce gave the Marine's knife back because Bruce's knife was bigger. Bruce's knife was so big that the Marine's knife was a kitchen tool by comparison. Bruce didn't need the Marine's knife. Bruce had his own. And Bruce's knife, the trained knife, the controlled knife, the knife made of years and repetitions and understanding, Bruce's knife stayed in its sheath. Bruce never drew it. Bruce moved his hips. Bruce shifted his weight. Bruce took the blade with his hands. Bruce gave the blade back with his hands. Bruce's knife, the real knife, the dangerous knife, the knife that could have ended the Marine on the wet concrete under the orange light, that knife stayed where it was. The deepest act of respect on that parking lot was not the return of the Marine's knife. The deepest act of respect was the sheathing of Bruce's. 3 men carried this story. The cook carried it from the parking lot to a dinner table. The cook carried it for 2 months. 2 months of holding a kitchen knife and feeling it differently. 2 months of putting his hand flat on the stainless steel counter at the end of a shift and feeling the cold and thinking of a man who put his hand flat on the hood of a car. 2 months of the story sitting in the cook's chest, heavy and warm, pressing against the inside of the ribs, asking to be told. The cook told it once. To my father. At a dinner. My father carried it from the dinner table to a car in a driveway. My father carried it for years. I don't know how many. My father didn't say, "This happened 2 years ago." My father didn't say, "I heard this last week." My father told the story the way a man tells something that has been inside him for a long time, settled, worn smooth, heavy with the years of carrying. The story had been in my father's chest long enough to become part of my father's chest. The story had grown around his ribs the way a tree grows around a fence. My father told it once. To me. In the car. I've carried it since. I've carried it from the driveway to every parking lot I've stood on. I've carried it through the glass that broke in my hand at 23. I've carried it through the hospital at 30. I've carried it through the moments when my knife, the one that lives in the space between what I feel and what I do, wanted to come out of its sheath, and I felt it pressing against the inside of my hand, pressing against the tendons, pressing against the muscles, asking to be held. And in those moments I feel the cold hood of my father's car under my palm. And I feel the steering wheel under my father's hands. And I feel the kitchen knife in the cook's hand. And I feel the space, the 3 feet of wet concrete, orange and quiet, between a man with a knife and a man without one. And I keep my knife in its sheath. Not always. I am not Bruce Lee. I am not a man who can stand with his hands at his sides while a blade comes at his chest. I am a man who carries a story that a cook told a mechanic that a mechanic told a boy in a car in a driveway in November. I am the 4th link in a chain that started on a parking lot in Chinatown in 1969, and I am not the strongest link, and I am not the weakest link, and I am the link that is telling you. You are the 5th link. You are sitting somewhere right now, in a room, on a train, in a car, on a bench, in a bed, and you are holding this story the way Bruce held the knife. Handle in the palm. Weight in the hand. The story is in your hand now, and the story is yours. I don't know your parking lot. I don't know your knife. I don't know the words that were said to you or the words you wanted to say. I don't know the glass in your hand or the diagnosis or the silence or the door closing. I don't know what your knife looks like, the knife inside you, the one in the space between what you feel and what you do. I don't know. But I know you have one. And I know that somewhere, tonight, tomorrow, next week, next year, you'll be on a parking lot. The concrete will be wet or dry. The light will be orange or yellow or white. A man will walk toward you, or you'll walk toward a man, and the distance will close and something will happen in the space between the two of you. Something with an edge. And you'll have a choice. The choice is not, do I fight or do I run? The choice is not, do I win or do I lose? The choice is, what do I do with the knife? Do I keep it? Do I give it back? My father said, remember. The cook touched his own hands when he told the story. Bruce put his hand on the cold hood of a car and felt the metal and the November and the weight of what he'd just done and what he'd chosen not to do. And the knife, the 4 inches of military steel that started this story and traveled through 4 tellings to get to you, the knife is in your hand now. What are you going to do with it? I'm sitting in a car. My car. My driveway. November. The engine is off. The windows are fogging. My hands are on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. The grip that my father held. The grip that holds. I've just told you a story. The story is out of my chest now. The story is in the air. The story is in the fog on the windshield. The story is traveling from my hands to your ears the way it traveled from a parking lot to a back door to a dinner table to a car to a driveway to a hand on a cold hood. The story is yours now. I open the car door. The cold air comes in. November. Night. The smell of dead leaves and concrete. The fog starts to clear edges first, then middle. The world comes back. I get out of the car. I stand in the driveway. My hands are in my pockets. My breath makes clouds. I take my right hand out of my pocket. I put my hand flat on the hood of the car. The metal is cold. My fingers spread. The street light is yellow on the back of my hand. I feel the cold. I feel the metal. I feel the weight. I hold it there.